the first reports started coming in that other branches in the New York metro area were going out, and we would cheer every time we'd hear about that. That then spread over the next day or so, as I recall, to other major cities on the eastern seaboard.
And that's when the word started to come in. That Pittsburgh went out, and Philadelphia, and wow.
In Minneapolis, carriers voted after the Washington agreement to strike at midnight tonight, saying Congress has consistently given us promises. We're not going to work merely for more promises. And Pittsburgh postal leaders said their members would carry no mail tomorrow.
Defiance began early in the morning here in Chicago when about 50 mailmen on the picket line voted to stay on strike despite a back-to-work court order.
Well, what if what you're doing is illegal?
I don't care. Now, I know it's against the law. That's in the Constitution. It's in my contract. If they want to put me in jail, put me in jail. But they haven't got a jail big enough to put all of us in.
Cleveland, Minneapolis, Jersey, Detroit, Chicago. So look at this whole country is it burning up.
Once you start hearing these other states going out, you said, wow, look at this. Look what we started, you know, and it was a great thing.
And then I remember what I thought was a pivotal moment, at least it was for me, and that was when we heard that Branch 9 in Minneapolis, that the letter carriers had announced that they were going on strike. And I said to all of my fellow carriers on the picket line, you know, I think we've got them. I think we're going to win this thing. Well, we're going to be okay, because if the carriers in the heartland of America are going out on strike, then it's all going to be good.
Once it came about, there was total support. Everybody joined in, and I've always said it. I compliment the clerks for joining us, mail handlers, truck drivers, because without them, you're not going to succeed.
And to know that your friends, I'm talking about the clerks, they were out there with us. That was big. Having the clerks helping us, that was big.
Even some of the supervisors, they were out there, you know, and with the clerks being out there, the motor vehicle drivers, the mail handlers being out there, it really prevailed everything.
Some visible early effects of the mail strike. Stock market volume was down. Much more business was transacted by telephone and teletype, special messengers carrying stock certificates and documents normally handled by mail. In the financial district, there was no way to schedule a stockholders meeting because there was no way to notify the stockholders or mail out the proxy statements. Credit cards could still pay for services, but cardholders could not be billed and could not pay what they owed.
We stopped a whole lot of things. We stopped Wall Street. We stopped a lot of businesses, insurance companies. All this came through the mail.
There was no electronic mailing and what have you. Everything was done through the mail. Documents, money, transfer stocks. I can imagine it had to be crazy.
Good evening. On Monday, I will meet my constitutional obligation to see that the mails go through. With those words, President Nixon faced up to an unprecedented crisis in the post office, the first strike in the 196 years since Benjamin Franklin set up the system. It is a domestic crisis with a potential economic impact, perhaps the greatest since the Depression. Since Wednesday, when 6,500 New York City letter carriers refused to shoulder their mail pouches, the strike has spread from coast to coast. Now it directly affects 14 states and has involved about 200,000 postal workers.
I'm sure Nixon, the government, was feeling pressure to end this strike. Keep in mind, there was no electronic communications in those days. Wall Street was in New York, and this had an effect on the economy. So we were in a advantageous position.
Last Saturday, I pledged to the nation that if the current situation existed on Monday, today, that I would take action to fulfill my constitutional obligation.
I have just now directed the activation of the men of the various military organizations to begin in New York City the restoration of essential mail services.
Can you imagine instead of having a letter carrier deliver the mail, having a guy with a bayonet walk into an office building? It's going from the ridiculous to the sublime. Boy, the carriers are the heartland of America. It's terrible.
When President Nixon came on and announced on TV that the National Guard was coming to deliver mail, that's when my wife really jumped and said, "Oh my God, you're going to lose your job. And you better go to work because if you lose your job, don't come home."
The troops, when we heard that they came in to deliver the mail, we said, well, the president's got to do what he has to do, but they're not going to move anything.
We knew our jobs. We knew what the postal system was like, and we knew that they could bring in as many troops as they wanted. Those troops were not going to be able to move the mail.
What exactly are you doing?
I don't really know.
Do you think you're doing it as fast as a postal worker?
No, I don't. No. He must have his own little tricks because I can't find half the slots.
There was one photograph of, actually two, of a soldier with his little fur hat looking at the letter and then looking up like, where am I, or who am I, where's this going, you know? And that said it all.
We are all loyal Americans, willing to go back to work, happy to go back to work, but we will not be coerced by troops.
I didn't recognize how big it was till years later. I mean, I knew it was big, but the magnitude of it, how we actually stopped the government. I mean, I can't believe it when I see it myself. I'm answering the President of the United States. He's making a speech about striking, and I'm telling him, look, you're not going to coerce us from going back to work. I mean, it's crazy. It really is.
There was a term that was used at the time in the media, and it was the revolt of the good guys. And I think that really was a term that accurately reflected the reality of not only how we felt about ourselves, but how the public felt about us.
I don't think the public knew what we was going through in the Postal Service because we never presented it to the public. And because we did our job.
Every media outlet was supportive of what we were doing. I mean, I think we had, like, in the public, we must have had 98% of people. They didn't realize how much we were working for.
And when you got out there on the strike, you saw the public, they wanted to know what was going on. You know, how was the working, you know, how was things working out for you?
I mean, they were walking back and forth and encouraging us. Don't worry, we're with you. You know, words of encouragement.
People was walking by and say, pay them what they deserve. Come on, pay them. You know, people was talking, giving us that little push.
And almost everybody would hunt their horns or get out and cheer for us, bring us coffee and donuts. But we still weren't sure how this was all going to work out.
It was announced at a New York news conference, a 12% pay increase, quicker raises, no penalties for local union leaders like Gus Johnson of the letter carriers.
As a consequence of the hardships we have all endured, and because of the absolute pledges given us by many of our friends in Congress, I hereby urge and direct the members of Branch 36 National Association of Letter Carriers to return to work. Thank you.
When I heard on day 8 that we couldn't go back to work, you know, everybody was cheering that we got the raise. And
I think everybody was just proud to be back. And everybody was just wanted to be back and wanted to get back to be there to deliver mail for the people.
They welcomed us back with open arms. It was happy to see us. Glad it's over. And I hope you get what you want. All good stuff. You felt good.
And people were happy. They were happy to get back to work. They were happy to know to celebrate that they won.
people talked about the money, but it was more than the money. It was much more than the money. The collective bargaining part was the major part of the whole strike.
Now we could sit down and really bargain. I mean, we could really talk. Our union, not only because of the strike, but our union with Vinny became very strong, very strong.
To this day, we're the only federal workers that have true collective bargaining. And I can say that it had a profound effect on the Postal Service. I would argue for the good. It brought labor stability to the Postal Service, which benefits postal customers, obviously.
They didn't penalize the union. They didn't arrest anybody in the union because the country knew it was right.
We got the right to have collective bargaining. We got the right to better benefits, better working conditions.
I had a carrier. He was a wonderful guy. He never took a day off. He never called and said, it's the kind of guy he was. What was his life? His life was going to work, being a letter carrier, and watching the Yankees. He was a diehard Yankee fan. That was his life. He loved the Yankees, and he loved his job, and he was a dedicated worker. He said to me that he had been working at that time about maybe 28, 29 years. He said, I don't know what I'm doing. This is the first time I ever felt like a man. Because he was fighting for himself.
That group of rank and file letter carriers who Vince Zombrano became the titular head of, stayed involved and worked and eventually was successful in changing the NALC to make it much more democratic, to make it much more progressive, to make it much more open to the will of the members that they represented.
When I went to Manhattan Center and saw 2,600 letter carriers in one building, most of us trying to come to a common goal, everybody there knowing that they all needed to do the right thing. A lot of people was afraid to do it. There was maybe 1,000 people that was afraid. Luckily, it was 1,500 of us that wasn't. That made a big change in the Postal Service today.
The wages, working conditions, benefits that I enjoyed for an entire career, and all the letter carriers that have followed since would not be anywhere near as good as they are now. I just can't see how that would have happened if we hadn't taken that risk.
My goal was I saw something wrong and I wanted to do something about it. That's all.
I didn't know. I mean, I was willing to go out on strike, but I didn't know that strike was going to save my job. You know, that was going to save me too, because I was struggling. That's about the only thing I could say about the strike. It changed my life. God, it changed my life.
It gave you a feeling that you were something. You were not just chattel. You're just not a worker. You could speak up and you can do things that made it better for yourself and for others.
It gave me, as it did so many other postal workers, an opportunity to make decent wages, provide a good life for myself and my family, and I'm grateful. And I know in my heart and soul that that would not have been possible if the letter carriers in New York had not taken that action.
We were really fighting the U.S. government, the majesty of this great nation. We had them on their knees. We did. And I never really understood it then until I started looking at some of these things and say, God, how the hell do we do this?